When I stepped into the courtroom, the laughter hit me before I even saw her face. My daughter, my own child, was grinning like a Cheshire cat, the kind of smile that made your stomach twist and your chest tighten. And my son-in-law? He couldn't meet my eyes. He looked down at the polished wooden floor, shifting uncomfortably in his seat as if trying to disappear entirely. The gavel hadn't even struck, and already the tension was suffocating. I straightened my shoulders, forcing calm into my voice, but inside, the betrayal stung sharper than I had expected. This was supposed to be my day, a legal battle I had prepared for months, one that would finally expose the deceit and manipulation my daughter and her husband had orchestrated behind my back. Yet here they were, behaving like children caught with their hands in the cookie jar, daring me to react. I took a deep breath and scanned the room. My lawyer, steadfast and unreadable, gave me a small nod of reassurance. Across the courtroom, my daughter's smirk widened just enough to confirm what I had suspected. She had not come here seeking justice, she had come to mock me. And he, her husband, was no innocent bystander. He had been the one whispering lies into her ear, convincing her that betraying me was the cleverest move she could make. Memories flashed like lightning, the phone calls ignored, the subtle insults disguised as concern, the legal documents she had accidentally misplaced, all pointing to a pattern that had been building for years. At first, I had brushed it off as family squabbles, as misunderstandings between parent and child. But the truth was undeniable. She had sided with him, not with me, and now they were playing their games in full view of the law. As the bailiff called the case, my pulse quickened. I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze, some curious, some sympathetic, some merely entertained. The courtroom was a theater, and my daughter and son-in-law were performing with the confidence of seasoned actors. But even actors falter when the truth catches them off guard. I reminded myself that I had prepared for this moment. Every document verified, every witness lined up, every legal argument rehearsed. Still, the laughter echoed in my ears, gnawing at the edges of my composure. That sound, my daughter laughing while her husband avoided my eyes, was a warning. They believed they had already won. And that, I realized with a slow, simmering fury, was their first mistake. Something had shifted in me the moment I walked through that door. The betrayal was raw, yes, but beneath it lay a rising tide of resolve. I wouldn't be mocked. I wouldn't be dismissed. The gavel struck. And as the court clerk called the case, I stepped forward, feeling the electricity of anticipation hum through the air. This was only the beginning. Even before the case began, the warning signs had been there, I just hadn't wanted to see them. At family gatherings, my daughter always had that extra sparkle in her eye when she spoke about her husband, the kind that made me uneasy. They would share whispered jokes, leaning close during conversations, and I would catch only fragments. "Don't worry, it'll be fine," or "he'll never know." I'd tell myself I was imagining it, that perhaps I was overprotective. The first real red flag came months ago when I noticed subtle favoritism in everyday matters. Family finances, which had once been managed collectively, suddenly seemed skewed. My daughter had access to certain accounts I didn't, funds shifted in ways that never made sense, and my requests for transparency were always met with excuses. "It's nothing, just routine," she'd say, smiling as if the words alone could erase my doubts. Then there were the secret calls. I would glance at my phone, only to see her slipping out of rooms, talking in hushed tones with that same gleam of mischief in her eyes. Sometimes I caught her husband hovering nearby, smiling slyly, as if sharing a private victory. Their closeness was no surprise. They were married, after all, but there was a conspiratorial energy between them, the kind that whispered secrets I wasn't meant to hear. Money matters grew even murkier. Unexpected charges on accounts, unusual transfers, and the occasional accidental loss of paperwork, all seemingly small, insignificant mistakes, but patterns formed quickly. I tried to brush it off, but a creeping unease settled over me, gnawing at the edges of my peace. Every time I questioned it, their calm reassurances barely masked the impatience and, occasionally, the faint smirk that made me question their honesty. The emotional strain was crushing. I found myself double-checking every conversation, rereading emails, and replaying interactions in my mind. My daughter's laughter at the courtroom felt like the culmination of years of subtle manipulations, of little lies, hidden agendas, and whispered reassurances that didn't add up. Each instance alone could be dismissed as coincidence, but together they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. Even my friends began noticing my tension. "Something's off," one whispered during a coffee meeting. I tried to explain it away. Maybe I was too sensitive, maybe I was reading too much into ordinary family dynamics. But deep down, I knew better. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing faster than I could manage. I realized that I was walking a tightrope, straining to discern reality from deception, trying to balance love for my child with the nagging suspicion that her allegiance might not be where I thought it was. The whispers of doubt had begun to take root, and I could feel my resolve hardening even as my heart ached. Something had shifted, quietly but irrevocably. And I knew that soon, the full truth would reveal itself, but when it did, I would need every ounce of strength to face it. The courtroom felt colder than ever that morning. I watched my daughter sit there, poised and confident, while her husband avoided my gaze, his knuckles whitening around the edge of the bench. And then, the bombshell hit, the moment I had feared but had steeled myself for. The lawyer representing her leaned forward, speaking slowly, deliberately. "Your Honor, the plaintiff alleges that the defendant misappropriated substantial family assets over the past 3 years, including transfers made without consent and documents forged to manipulate ownership of key properties." My stomach dropped. Transfers? Forged documents? My mind raced, heart pounding as every red flag I had noticed, the hidden calls, the smirk when I questioned accounts, the preferential treatment, snapped into focus. My daughter and her husband hadn't just been sneaky, they had been orchestrating a full-scale betrayal. The shock was suffocating. "How could you do this?" I whispered under my breath, more to myself than anyone else. The courtroom seemed to blur, the murmurs of attorneys and clerks fading into a dull hum as disbelief and heartbreak washed over me. My own child, the one I had raised with love and care, had been complicit in undermining me, stealing assets I had worked my whole life to secure. And he, her husband, the architect of this scheme, had manipulated her, convincing her that betrayal was acceptable. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Rage bubbled beneath the surface, a molten heat I barely contained. I had been blindsided, outplayed, and humiliated in a place meant for justice. Every smile she had given me over the years now seemed like mockery, every whispered reassurance a carefully crafted lie. The judge called for the evidence to be presented, and one by one, the documents landed on the table: unauthorized transfers, altered contracts, communications showing deliberate attempts to mislead me and gain control over family assets. My daughter's hands were steady, but her eyes flickered once toward her husband, betraying a hint of uncertainty, a small crack in their perfect façade. I could barely process it. The betrayal wasn't abstract, it was tangible, financial, legal, and personal. The people I had trusted most in the world had turned against me in a calculated, premeditated act. The courtroom seemed to shrink around me, the weight of disbelief and heartbreak pressing on my chest. And yet, beneath the storm of emotions, a seed of clarity began to take root. Their confidence, their laughter, their smirks, they had assumed victory was theirs. But I wasn't broken. I hadn't lost everything, not yet. The silence after the revelation was deafening, and I could feel every eye in the courtroom shifting, sensing the tension. My mind began to sharpen, thoughts coalescing into a single, unyielding truth. If they thought I would be defeated by betrayal, they had gravely underestimated me. Somewhere between heartbreak and rage, I found resolve. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning. And I would make them regret ever underestimating the one person they had truly betrayed, the courtroom lights felt harsh, almost cruel, as I sank into my chair, the weight of betrayal pressing down like 1,000 stones. My daughter's calm demeanor, her husband's smug avoidance, it was almost too much to bear. My chest ached, my mind spun, but beneath the swirl of heartbreak and anger, something stirred, a quiet, burning determination. I replayed the months of deception in my head, each coincidental misstep now glaringly deliberate. The secret calls, the missing documents, the subtle manipulations, all of it had led to this moment. And for a heartbeat, I let myself feel the despair, let the betrayal sting fully. But then, slowly, clarity broke through. I realized something powerful. The people who had underestimated me had not truly defeated me. They had only shown me the scale of their audacity, and, in doing so, had awakened a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. It was in the small, humiliating gestures that I found my trigger. The way my daughter had laughed as I entered the courtroom, like a predator taunting its prey. The way her husband had refused to meet my eyes, as if hiding the guilt he knew he couldn't escape. That split second of arrogance, it ignited something inside me. I would not be a victim. I would not be mocked. I straightened my shoulders and took a slow, steadying breath. The sorrow remained, but it was now fuel, not chains. My mind began to shift from pain to strategy. Every document they had forged, every transfer they had hidden, these were not just acts of deceit, they were opportunities. I could use the very evidence of their arrogance against them. I could expose them publicly, legally, decisively. In that moment, I understood, strength wasn't just about anger or confrontation. It was about patience, precision, and timing. Their confidence, my daughter's laughter, her husband's feigned composure, was a weakness. They believed victory was theirs, and that blind certainty would be their undoing. I glanced at my lawyer, who had been silently observing, waiting for me to find my footing. Our eyes met, and I nodded. No words were necessary. I had decided. I would fight, not recklessly, but methodically. Every red flag I had ignored before was now a map leading to justice. Every slight, every lie, every stolen opportunity would be accounted for. The fire in my chest had replaced the weight in my heart. Betrayal had cut deep, yes, but it had also awakened a clarity, a resolve that nothing could shake. I would reclaim what was mine, not just the assets, but my dignity, my authority, my respect. As the gavel struck again, calling the court to order, I sat taller, my mind calm yet razor-sharp. They may have laughed, they may have looked away, but the game had just begun, and I was no longer the person they thought they could break. The moment I left the courthouse, I didn't go home. I went somewhere quieter, safer. A place where emotions wouldn't cloud precision. Betrayal had already taken enough from me. From here on out, every move would be calculated. Step 1 was proof. I began with what they thought I'd never check, timelines. Bank transfers dated just weeks before the lawsuit. Property titles quietly amended. A family trust altered with signatures that looked like mine, but weren't. I requested certified copies of everything. Every page told the same story. My daughter and her husband hadn't acted alone. They'd planned this for months, maybe longer. Step 2 was witnesses. Old friends stopped returning my daughter's calls once they realized I was asking questions. My former accountant admitted, off the record, that he'd been pressured to simplify documents. A junior paralegal at my son-in-law's firm nervously confirmed late-night edits to filings that never passed proper review. Each confession was small. Together, they formed a noose. Step 3 was silence. I didn't confront them. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I played the role they expected, the broken parent. I let my daughter believe her laughter had crushed me. I let my son-in-law think his legal maneuvering was flawless. At family gatherings, I stayed quiet. I nodded. I smiled faintly. They mistook restraint for surrender. Meanwhile, my lawyer and I worked in shadows. We cross-referenced signatures with forensic experts. We traced shell accounts. We found the clause they'd overlooked, the one my late spouse had insisted on years ago, requiring unanimous consent for any trust changes involving marital assets. They had violated it. Step 4 was timing. We waited. Let them grow comfortable. Let them finalize their narrative. Let them present their confidence to the court like armor. My daughter posted celebratory photos online, cryptic captions about new beginnings and toxic chapters finally closed. My son-in-law started acting like the case was already won. That arrogance was the trap. Because while they celebrated, we prepared a countermotion so devastating it would freeze the room. Not accusations, evidence. Not emotion, documentation. A chain of facts so clean, so undeniable, that no amount of legal gymnastics could save them. And the final step? Exposure. Not just in court, but everywhere that mattered. Professional boards. Financial institutions. Family circles that had only heard their version. Truth doesn't need theatrics. It only needs light. The night before the next hearing, I slept better than I had in months. They still thought they were in control. They had no idea the ground beneath them was already cracking. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension, the air thick as if even the walls knew what was about to happen. My daughter's confident smile was still there, her husband's smug posture unchanged. They believed they had orchestrated the perfect betrayal, but their perfect plan was about to unravel in spectacular fashion. When my lawyer stood, he didn't speak with anger, he spoke with precision. "Your Honor," he began, "we have uncovered evidence of deliberate misappropriation, falsification of documents, and violations of the family trust. The defendants presented a façade of compliance, but the truth is in these records." A stack of documents slid across the table. Signatures, bank transfers, emails, every lie meticulously planned, every deception now laid bare. The judge glanced at the mountain of evidence, eyebrows raised. My daughter's composure faltered for the first time. Her husband's confident sneer wavered as forensic analysis confirmed forgery beyond doubt. Then came the twist. My lawyer revealed an overlooked clause in the trust. Any unauthorized transfer of assets or falsification of signatures would automatically revert ownership to me. The judge's gavel echoed like thunder as he reviewed the clause. "By law," he said, "all properties and assets in question shall revert immediately to the rightful heir." My heart pounded as the weight of justice landed squarely on their shoulders. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and the click of cameras capturing every stunned expression. My daughter turned pale, her eyes darting to her husband, realizing too late that their schemes had crumbled. Their whispers, their secretive glances over the years, all meaningless against the sheer power of evidence. Financially, they were obliterated. Bank accounts frozen. Transfers reversed. Investments reclaimed. Their friends, who had silently cheered them on, now watched in stunned silence. Social media lit up within minutes, news outlets shared the story, betrayal exposed, family empire restored to the rightful owner. Humiliation wasn't just a courtroom experience, it became global. Even more satisfying was the personal vindication. My daughter avoided my gaze entirely now, her laughter gone. Her husband tried to maintain his pride but couldn't hide the fear and disbelief that flickered in his eyes. The same arrogance that had fueled their betrayal had become their undoing. As I stepped forward, the courtroom lights shining down, I realized the truth. Revenge wasn't just about punishment, it was about restoration. I had regained not just my assets, but my dignity. Their betrayal, so carefully crafted, had only made my victory sweeter. In that moment, I felt a calm, terrifying satisfaction. They had underestimated me, thought my heartbreak would keep me paralyzed. But every deceitful act they committed had been a step toward their own undoing. And now, justice, perfect, complete, and inescapable, had been served. The courtroom had emptied hours ago, but the echoes of the verdict lingered like a distant storm. My daughter's betrayal, once a jagged wound in my life, had finally been exposed, and with it came a liberation I hadn't dared imagine. The empire that had been threatened was mine again, not just in legal terms, but in spirit. The power, respect, and authority I had earned over decades were restored, and the weight of deception was lifted from my shoulders. News outlets splashed the story across screens and headlines: family betrayal exposed, inheritance battle ends in shock, justice served an unthinkable twist. Friends, colleagues, and even distant relatives reached out, offering support and admiration. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the sting of whispers or smirks. I felt strength, clarity, and, unexpectedly, pride. My daughter's laughter, once a knife twisting in my chest, was now silent. Her husband, who had orchestrated the betrayal with such confidence, was left to face the ruin he had brought upon himself. Bank accounts frozen, property reverted, social reputation in shambles, every calculated step of theirs had become their own trap. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very pride and arrogance that fueled their scheme had ensured their downfall. I walked through the restored halls of my business empire, each familiar corridor now a testament to perseverance over deceit. Employees greeted me with renewed respect, some even quietly mentioning how they had feared the worst before the truth emerged. The empire wasn't just mine again, it belonged to integrity, not manipulation. Yet even as I stood victorious, I felt a deeper, more personal satisfaction. Betrayal had a face, a name, and it had learned the cost of underestimating someone who refuses to be broken. My heart, once heavy with grief and disbelief, was now tempered with the knowledge that resilience, patience, and strategy could turn despair into triumph. To anyone watching this story unfold, betrayal can cut deep, especially when it comes from those you love. But remember, strength often grows in the shadows of deceit. If you've faced treachery, if you've felt the sting of someone you trusted turning against you, comment below, share your story, and know that you're not alone. And if you want to see how I turned heartbreak into justice, subscribe to follow the full journey of resilience, cunning, and ultimate vindication. Because in the end, karma isn't just a word, it's a reckoning. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply watching the arrogant stumble over the very trap they set for you. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was inevitable. And for them, that inevitability hit harder than any courtroom gavel ever could.